Art, Vicky,
Here.
Helen,
Here.
and Dr. Nix, who will be here shortly. And this is, okay, next we're going to do the approval of the minutes.
I read through them, and I make a motion that we accept them as is.
Okay, any second?
And that will have come from,
Oh,
Janet, this is Janet Dermeyer.
that's right.
Thank you.
Don't forget to say your names, everyone. Okay, anyone second?
Vicky Minecraft, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Tamala, what did you want me to write again? The, acting, okay. Okay, let's move on to staff reports.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, did you mention public comment, or?
I'm going to move public comment to the end.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
if
thank
that's
you.
okay.
That-
Great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah. Executive office?
That will be me today.
Okay.
So a gracious good afternoon. Welcome and Happy New Year. My name is George Ferry. I am the Director of the Compliance Division, and I'll be giving you the executive staff report this afternoon. So let's start with the first item under executive. Overview of TDLR and the executive office operations restructuring and personnel changes. So you may remember at the last meeting I let y'all know that our longtime executive director, William Kuntz, was retiring August 31st, which he has done. He's now sitting at home in his shorts and T-shirt,
Lucky dog.
maybe listening into us for all we know.
I so hope he's not.
Then again,
If
But,
he is, we should all wait.
Hey, Bill. As a result, the commission appointed Mr. Brian Francis, our former deputy director, to be our executive director here at TDLR. And as part of that, we've done some restructuring of our executive office. You may be very aware that we have increasing responsibilities here at TDLR with programs coming on and 6 more down the pike. But as part of the restructuring of the executive office, we're excited to announce that we now have 2 new leaders on the executive team, one of whom is sitting next to me here, and I'll introduce him in a second. Our new deputy executive director is Carla James. Carla comes to us from the Comptroller of Public Accounts, where she served as the Appropriations Control Supervisor. She has extensive experience in state budget and accounting policies and procedures related to appropriations, our budget, and accounting functions. She, prior to working for the Comptroller, she also worked as a Deputy Security Commissioner, and she was at one point the Executive Director of the Texas Incentive and Productivity Commission. She has a degree from the University of Texas. Brian isn't here to slap my hand down. And she is primarily responsible for operations and regulatory services, that group of responsibilities in the executive office. Also, sitting next to me here is Mr. Nick Boenis. Nick comes to us from the University of Texas at Austin, where he served as the Senior Associate Athletic Director from 2005 to 2016. Nick managed and supervised the department's media relations, marketing, game day productions, web, photography, video, and graphic design staff, so he's got a lot of experience there. Prior to working at UT, Nick served as the Director of Media Relations for Public Strategies and has extensive experience as a communications director for Texas government leadership in political campaigns. Nick also is a graduate of the University of Texas. And his primary responsibilities will be customer service, strategic communication, and government relations. And I'm going to pause here for a second and let Nick say hello to you.
Hi, Madam Chair and members, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's been a whirlwind, a little over a month. We're learning a lot. We have a great staff and some great folks that have a passion for all this and are eager to serve the citizens of the state of Texas, and just glad to be here and look forward to working with you closer as we move on.
Great,
Thank you, Nick. Obviously, we're very happy to have these two highly qualified and very experienced individuals to serve on our leadership team with the executive office with Mr. Francis and support him, and he is very happy to have the help, believe me. So now, legislative update. So you may have heard that the legislature's in town. They've been filing bills. They were able to file bills starting on November 14th, and I checked, and as of the end of the day yesterday, there's been 1,769 bills filed. Generally, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 6,000 bills filed during a session, so they've got a little ways to go still. They'll be filing bills basically through the middle of March. We are in the process of tracking those bills. And in fact, I will tell you that if you go to our website, we have a link on our website where we posted, as bills are introduced that relate to us or our programs, we post them. It's a link called Legislation Considered in the 85th Session that affects TDLR. And then you click on that link, and then you'll have a list of the programs. So you can go to bills that might impact your program, unless you're just really dying to know everything that's happening at TDLR and you want to track all the bills, including air conditioning contractors, and then no, okay. However, you don't have to go through all that. So we're starting in the neighborhood of March, something like that. They'll start having committee hearings, and we'll be attending committee hearings, but we'll keep you all posted on what's going on, both on the website and obviously in these reports at the advisory board meetings. Another item, so as a result, or as a requirement of Senate Bill 202, we are required to file a report every December 1st, for a while anyway, on our efforts to implement the programs. Obviously, we had the first 7, of which y'all were one, were implemented on October 3rd of 2016. We did file the report. Y'all should have gotten a copy of that report. We also sent copies to the Sunset Advisory Commission and to certain committees in the House and the Senate, so that they're aware of how we're progressing on the implementation of these programs here at TDLR. We also included in that another document that we were required to produce even earlier than that, and that's our transition plan with DSHS. We've had a very good working relationship with the DSHS. They've been very helpful and very informative. And in fact, we have several of our staff here on staff now at TDLR. But that process has been a very good one, and we're continuing now into phase 2, which will be another 6 programs. In fact, under recent developments, I will tell you that we had a consolidation team that we formed here at TDLR that had representatives for all the different functional areas: licensing, enforcement, compliance, customer service, education and examination, making preparations to take the programs on, trying to anticipate all the issues that needed to be dealt with. That primarily is in place now. Certainly there's some little things that crop up as we go through the process here. But that's the phase 1 of the transition. So the implementation team is now moving on to phase 2, the next 6 programs that will be coming over to us. Those will be coming to us November 1 of 2017. So that's the date that will complete basically all the requirements of Senate Bill 202, pending whatever comes out of the legislature this session. I will tell you this, that as part of our implementation, since all of the programs in phase 1 have advisory boards, and we, as you're well aware, we appointed those advisory boards in advance of the actual transition of the programs to anticipate problems, anticipate things that need to be dealt with. These next 6 programs do not have advisory boards. 2 of them have the authority to maybe establish advisory boards. And we do have general authority in our Chapter 51, which is the law that applies to the agency as a whole, to establish advisory boards as we may need to. But we did some forums, some public forums in Austin, Arlington, and Houston, where we invited folks, licensees from these Phase 2 programs to come and talk to us. We gave them a little 101 on TDLR to tell them kind of how we operate and how we're organized. And then we asked them the 4 questions that we ask in our strategic planning forums that we do around the state. What are we doing well? What can we do better? If you could be king or queen for the day, what one thing, rule, law, whatever, would you change? And then what do you see changing in the next 5 years? And we gathered a lot of comments from those folks, and we'll be sorting through those in anticipation of bringing the programs on and providing the services that are needed. So that is what I have for you all today under the executive staff report. Do y'all have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ferry, Charlita Guillory. I have not had a chance to look at the website.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of the bills that have been filed already, could you tell me if there are any that affect the midwifery board specifically, or midwives in general?
Okay. I'm not aware of any right now.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I'll give you an up to the minute update right now. Let's see if there's a, there, right? We try and be as responsive as possible. No, ma'am, because I am correct. That program is not listed in the list yet. So you won't see your program on the list of programs until there's actually a bill that somehow impacts your program. So stay tuned. I wouldn't say you need to obsessively check it like every 5 minutes, but at the very least, once a week or something like that. And chances are, well, I mean, we'll keep y'all apprised on this.
And-
This is the primary method, so.
George, and if I can interrupt, Mary Winston, in the Office of Strategic Communication, Jeff Kopus, who's watching somewhere, he runs this daily. He gets notices whenever they come out. He compiles this list. If you guys pop up, he knows it, and we know it immediately. And it will be listed by subject matter on our website. So as George was talking, I'm over here going, no. But that's just because I work right beside Jeff. And I know that. So, yeah, we will definitely keep you posted.
Victoria Meinhardt, my question would be, so, is this on? Anyways, the question is, so the best way for us to find out about any bills affecting us is to go on the website and check?
Yes.
Or here at these advisory board
It's
meetings?
on now, yes. Yes, ma'am. And,
Okay.
you could, now, if you want to be a geek like some of us here, you can certainly go in the Texas legislature online and actually check the bills that are introduced every day. I mean, and I know personally when I'm tracking the bills, I bring up the bills filed that day and I read, and it shows you all the captions of the bills, which is just kind of a one-liner basically saying what the bill is about. If you want to do that, that's certainly an option. But we'll try and keep you informed and save you that effort, so.
Okay, thank you.
Janet Durmeyer, when you say you'll inform us, will you send out an email to us, or how quickly would we hear that?
Probably, I don't think we're going to be able to send out emails every time there's a bill filed. But it's, like I said, we're posting them online here, so my recommendation is do check. One thing you may not see on this, well, trying to think if we have a link on here. Actually, it takes you to the Texas legislature online. Let me check and see. And actually, yeah, so it looks like there's a link on here. It'll show the bill number and the caption that I mentioned earlier. And that'll take you to the Texas legislature online site. And that shows you the status of the bill. It's being heard in the committee, or it's been passed out of the committee, or nothing's happened since it was filed, or whatever the case may be. So that's going to be, I think, your best way to keep track of the bills as they go along. So.
Anything else?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Compliance.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Feinleib with the Compliance Division, and I'm excited to be giving you the Compliance Division report. And of course, it's going to focus on health professions and on midwives. The Compliance Division is very large. It has many other programs all covered, and I'm not going to talk about the other things that are going on, really, okay? So you have a document here, looks like this somewhere in your meeting materials. So I'm not going to repeat everything on it. I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights for you. So the transition is complete. We're able to license and renew people. We have people starting to apply for renewal online already for midwives. I'm not sure if any of them have processed through yet, but you will get a licensing report later from Leonard Rivas, who used to be at DSHS, and he's really easy to work with, and he's making sure everything goes smoothly. So if you hear about a problem, you're welcome to contact me, but in general, people should go to customer service, email them, call them, let them work it through the normal process. Sometimes maybe they've sent something, but we haven't reviewed it yet, so they will be processed very shortly, but let me know if I can help, if you need anything, okay? Because this is our first time doing midwife renewals now, just starting up for the March 1st deadline. In terms of my report, this transition has gone really, really well, and so that group that was meeting weekly that George mentioned, the consolidation team that has members of all the different functional parts of TDLR, is really shifting its attention to phase 2, which is the next round of programs coming from DSHS. So issues can still be brought there, but things seem to be running pretty smoothly in terms of these phase 1 programs, and so now the planning is really gearing up for the phase 2 programs that are coming in November. One thing that I'm participating in that I'm really enjoying and that I think will add value is there's a Versa improvement team to look at our online system and our database and continue making improvements even as some parts of that Versa team plan for the programs to migrate over from phase 2. That doesn't mean we're just going to stop at what we got in the system, but we have to prioritize. So I know, for example, midwives can't apply for an initial license online right now, and that is on the list, but we're having to look at what is easy to do, what is hard to do, and what is the most bang for the buck in terms of prioritizing what to do first. So when we have maybe 20 people applying total every year, some programs have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people applying. So we may have to do some of the larger program work first, but that doesn't mean those things are not on the list or forgotten. And I'm enjoying working with that group and figuring out how to, add improvements and add functionality. So you're always welcome to send me if you think of something our system should do that it's not doing. Okay, send me an email. And that group meets monthly. Then in terms of personnel updates, we have completed our health professions team for phase 1. We've hired some additional staff from DSHS with expertise in both current and future programs. So we're feeling really good about that. We've got a good team under Stephen Mills, who used to be my boss a long time ago over at DSHS and is my boss here again. So I'm happy about that. And we're working together really well and communicating really well. Public outreach, we did do phone calls with Paula Davis with ATM to find out what the association's perspective was on the transition. TDLR is really big into outreach. And instead of waiting for somebody to come and complain, we want to go find out, is everything working? Tell us what you're hearing. Let us know what's going on. We don't know if you don't tell us. And we don't wait for people to come to us. We go out and talk to them. And Brian's really big on that. And I think it's making a huge difference in how people see us and our willingness to communicate and listen, that we're actively soliciting it. And she was one of the people who had brought up the issue of not being able to apply for a new license online yet. The application is out there to print out and mail, but, and it's the TDLR version, so it looks different. We also are going to attend the ATM annual conference again this year. I don't know how many people will come. You know how TDLR is. Sometimes we send many people. So if you have a local group that meets, a regional group, a local midwifery association, that you would like somebody from TDLR to come out and talk and get feedback and provide you with information, it could be on any topic. It doesn't have to just be a compliance thing. Please get in touch with us, let us know, let us get something scheduled so that we can come out and meet with you and assist in any way that you would like us to, okay? And the health professions section update on these transitions. The programs that are coming, I just wanted to let you know, massage therapy, that's the biggest. You know, all the license types in massage from DSHS. Sanitarians, code enforcement officers, offender education providers, those are all coming out of professional licensing where midwives used to be. And then we have mold assessors and remediators and laser hair removal facilities and personnel, which are coming out of a different part of DSHS regulatory services. And so we have some more health-related programs and some more not really health-related in terms of providing a healthcare service, like sanitarians and code enforcement officers. Generally, they're experts on environmental health. They do various kinds of inspections. They are employed by various governmental entities sometimes. They may not be placed with health professions. We're still looking at the placement of everything. We don't know exactly where all these programs will fit yet, right, George? We're still looking at that for the phase 2 programs?
The organization as far as where we'll have staff and that sort of thing?
Which
within-
ones will be in our health professions
No,
section
we're-
of compliance?
There's still some evaluation. I think most of them will be in, most if not all, will be in that's the health section, health profession section, yes.
Okay. So I don't know if I'll have any responsibilities with any of them yet or not. But I used to have massage and code enforcement and sanitarians, so I'm happy to see them again. And that's pretty much my report unless you have questions. I did want to remind you one thing about the legislative information. Remember the things that are specific to midwives are going to flag as midwife. Occasionally there are changes that apply to all kinds of licenses. And I know that you remember seeing that with the military spouse language that we put in our rules at DSHS. There was some language about advantages for people who are current or ex-military. Things like that are going to come in the all license category. And then if you see something that you think is important that's not on our website, like maybe it relates to a healthcare law rule that doesn't say the word midwife, or that doesn't even talk about birth specifically in a way that would be real easy to connect to our license, but you know it's going to have some impact on your practice, which would mean it would have an impact on the regulated profession if we had to, you know, do something about somebody who broke that law, please let us know so that we are on top of what's going on, okay? You may see something we don't.
Well, I do know there's a bill that's gonna address eye prophylaxis in the session, and I'm not really sure if that's been filed
Actually, Mary
yet.
Winston, we already are aware of that bill.
Okay.
And we are doing analysis, and so thank you.
Okay.
We really, hey Jeff, he does a fantastic job. He's at EOT and we get these updates continually, so
Okay.
we do. If you want to visit about it, definitely let us know, but we too, we're so glad to have Yvonne. And as she says, that you'll have, from your specific profession and then from occupations in general, there may be bills out there that will affect you. So Jeff's done this a long time, our staff has. We have from the fiscal impact, and we now have Carla, who helps our fiscal analyst, Tony Cuvion. We are just on it all the time. So Jeff already sent that update to several of us, maybe not you, and I'm not sure, maybe so, but we are aware, and I'm so glad that you guys are aware, which means that you're staying up on it. So it's just, our website is another place you can come and look, and as always, y'all can just give us a call.
Victoria Meinhardt. There is also a bill that I'm sure most of you have heard about it, about the miscarriage law, where if you go into a hospital, you have to provide burial for the remains. And while that doesn't directly affect midwifery care, it does affect how we counsel patients who are involved in a miscarriage, and they want to know about that information. That law, I think, was stayed by a judge until the 23rd, but I'm not sure what the status is of it now. I know that the local hospital here has decided to absorb that cost, but it is something that midwifery patients are dealing with us. So again, it's one of those bills where maybe it doesn't affect how we practice, but it does affect how we counsel patients as to, you know, what to do and how to deal with that kind of thing. So, you know, so my question is, so I see a bill like this that comes up, who exactly do I email to say, hey, this is going to impact how we counsel people?
Actually, as an advisory board member, simply send it to advisoryboards@tdlr.
Okay.
And anyone else out there, you can do the same.
Okay, great.
we're aware of that one as well, and that one has been a rather large news story.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, yes, ma'am, that definitely does affect. So anything like that, just contact us.
Okay, thank you.
Janet Dermeyer, I don't know if you're the right one to address. I had a question about complaints being processed. Do I ask that, or do we wait for enforcement? Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, if it's not specifically a law, that may be affected with a bill, but there are a lot of things in appropriations. For example, we're expanding newborn screening. We are affecting, the Medicaid payments are going to be affected, and that indirectly will affect us here. There are other things as it relates to what should we do in terms of how we're caring for babies in general now. There are a lot of complaints about things that are happening in terms of neonatal care. So some of those things eventually will affect us. So I just wanted to be sure that even though it's not a bill, there are still things that are moving that will affect the babies here.
Dr. Guillory, Mary Winston again, I think you've been here long enough to know that we are always moving. We are always researching.
I do, and I appreciate
We
it.
don't know everything, of course, but with the wonderful people that we inherited and or stole from DSHS, and we thank them for letting us steal them, and the people that we already have working here, that we really, TDLR does not operate in a bubble at all. And we know the different medical bills or laws, or, babies are people too. So
Like
these
that.
things will affect some of our licensees. And so we really do, in our human power, try to keep an eye on everything. But again, if you have information that you don't think we have, please reach out and let us know. And as advisory board members, that's one of those things that we look towards you guys for. Yeah.
Dr.
I do appreciate everything you do.
Lori Fremgen here. What were those, were they bills or?
Well, no, and sometimes you don't want to necessarily open up bills
Yeah.
or new laws
Yeah.
that may affect
Now,
old
I'm
laws.
gonna pause you right here, Dr. Guillory, just because if we're gonna go, because we're in midwifery here, we're talking about midwives.
Yeah.
And you are, of course, a physician. So there are gonna be things that deal with physicians and laws that regulate physicians. They will possibly come towards midwifery and what midwives have to do as far as care, but I don't want to open up our midwives meeting to another board's issue. Now, we can, visit about.
Mainly, I was only talking about expansion of newborn screening that will affect
Okay,
this group.
so we're gonna.
That's it.
Okay,
yes.
and that was the information I wanted.
That
expansion
is
of
it. That's
newborn
it.
screening.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And that's something, as we move forward, if we have work groups and something that needs to, be addressed.
Yeah.
If that comes up and we need to put that in a work group to discuss, we'll do that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Helen Delson, I think our state association has a lobbyist, and so that should come in handy. He's always looking out for us.
Okay. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, education.
Okay, education, I spoke with our director a little earlier, and we don't have a report for education. That work group has not yet met. So we're gonna pass on them for today.
Okay.
Unless you have some other questions that you wanna get to. It's just not been time, and then I see Charlotte's chomping at the bit to
I know,
get
she's
up
so
here and
ready.
talk to you. So,
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, enforcement.
Hello all, Charlotte Melder with the Enforcement Division. All right, so I know there are going to be questions, but let me go ahead and get through the report real quick. As you can see, for our recent accomplishment and current projects, on November 8th, the Criminal Conviction Guidelines for the Midwifery Program was published on our department's website, so that is available for everybody if they want to go see it. They were approved by the Commission on October 5th and published in the Texas Register shortly thereafter. And then on January 12th, The enforcement work group met to finalize our penalty matrix, which is on our agenda later on today. Very excited about that. And we have begun inviting members to fill out a survey to serve as expert witnesses in our enforcement cases. We've received several back from this board specifically. Thank you very much. And as far as our key statistics go, 18 cases transferred from DSHS. One has been opened outside of that, but it was actually in a case that came from DSHS. We just didn't open a case because it was at hearing already. 2 cases have been closed with the withdrawal of the complaint, and the rest of them are still pending. No orders issued or anything like that. We're still working on finalizing our processes to move these cases forward. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Janet Dermeyer.
Yes.
I've been getting a lot of calls, actually, from midwives around the state who happen to be privy that they actually have a complaint that was filed against them.
Mhm.
And they've asked me for what is the process, and I'd like for public, this meeting for you to explain what is the process.
For the process for the cases that have already been filed?
No, if you received a complaint in the last month, let's say, what is the process?
If the department receives a complaint?
Yes.
When the department receives a complaint, the intake division analyzes that complaint to see if an allegation was made that we have jurisdiction over. So a violation of the law or rules. If an allegation was made that fits that category, that we have jurisdiction over, and there's enough information to proceed, such as the name of the midwife or, that sort of thing, it doesn't have major gaps, then the intake person comes and talks to me, we review it, they open the case in our system, and it's forwarded to an investigator. The investigator will send a letter, an email, make a phone call to the respondent, the person alleged to have violated our law and rules, and then the complainant, if it's not anonymous, gather documents, go through the whole process, also conferring with me. We look at all the information. Once it's determined that the investigation can be complete, and that could include consulting with an expert, a lot of different things, getting documents. Once that investigation is complete, then the file officially is in my name, and I review everything, although should have been involved from the very beginning. Review all of the information. Hopefully we have everything that we need. If it is determined that a violation occurred, again, the midwife would have already spoken with our investigator, and the complainant would have spoken with our investigator. This is the typical procedure currently. Once I determine, okay, I believe a violation occurred, I would send out what's called a notice of alleged violation. We call it NOAV. And the NOAV will say, the department believes that you have committed this violation, and as such, we are proposing that you pay this amount of penalty or have this sanction. We'll reduce it to this amount, or call us. Call me. Here's my phone number for my legal assistant. Give us a call. We'll talk about it. Go ahead.
Excuse me, just to clarify that,
Yes.
is that like a negotiation between you
It can be once they call,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
They can say, you know what, I did do that, that's a fair penalty, sign a settlement agreement, which is included in the NOAV, and then we get an order issued by our executive director as an agreed order. So they don't have to call if they don't want to, but I recommend everyone call or write or something so that we can have that dialogue. They may have proof that didn't come out for some reason that they were holding on to. If they choose to ignore it completely, that's problematic because we can get a default order issued by our executive director without any conversation going on, as long as we can prove that we sent it to the address of record on file at the department. And then, or they can request a hearing if they want a hearing. And then we would go in front of SOA, the State Office of Administrative Hearings. That process would go to completion and then go before our commission for a final decision.
If that complaint is anonymous,
Yes.
does it go a different route?
It does not go a different route, it just has less stops along the way. So you can't confer with the complainant with, okay, we need this more information to be able to proceed. Or the investigator, okay, there's these gaps, what actually happened here? Or do you have the receipt for this? Or something like that. We wouldn't be able to do those things. So it's, all the same avenues are there. A hearing might be a problem if we don't have a witness. I mean, if it's not a factual, documented, where the violations in the documents sort of thing. So it's not a different process, it's just shorter.
It could still have the same credibility.
It would, as long as we have everything we need.
Janet Dermeyer.
Madam Chair, can just like to, for the record, recognize that Dr. Nix has arrived, so.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
welcome.
Be okay, sir.
Being late.
Hey, not a problem.
Janet Dermeyer, at what point do those complaints ever come to this advisory committee? And it's different, so I want to ask the question for clarity. Do we ever vote on that?
No,
or-
complaints do not come to the advisory
At
committee
all,
in any way, nope.
And it's at your discretion who you choose to be an expert witness on any complaint?
Yes.
Is that correct?
It's, well, the investigator is the one who's officially sending that out, but the enforcement division will make that decision.
It's very different.
I know it
Very.
is. I know it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of
We're all
scary.
adjusting still.
Yeah.
I know. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Brenda Buffington. During a hearing, is the midwife able to bring legal counsel? to the
Absolutely.
hearing? Okay.
Absolutely. And she's able to get legal counsel and have them talk to me in advance. So. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And finally, licensing.
Good afternoon, Leonard Rivas from the Licensing Division. We haven't had much activity with the midwifery program. We've processed 5 applications since the transition, and the 5 applications were processed in the month of December. The total population for the midwifery program is 268. As Yvonne mentioned earlier, we have started receiving online renewal notification, and we'll be sending out notices to the midwives to submit their additional documentation so we can renew them. The health professions group will be hiring a part-time position, 28 hours a week. And that's all I have for the licensing division, unless you have questions.
Victoria Meinhardt, I don't have a question as much as I have just some excellent feedback of midwives that I've known who've renewed have been saying that this is the easiest thing they've ever done to renew their license.
Great.
So, thank you.
Glad to hear that. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Do y'all want to take a break, or do you want to keep on going?
I could take a bio break.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
want y'all to know that, we talked a lot about trust issues, and this is really a trust-building thing, and I so appreciate the work y'all have done. Chris and Christina and Charlotte, y'all are just awesome, and it's been really good. It's a good thing. It really is a good thing, and I really appreciate y'all's openness and your willingness to learn and your wanting, your desire to learn, to know a little bit more about what we do and what we're about. So before you gave your report, I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Advisory Board members, I'm Christina Kaiser. I'm the Director of the Enforcement Division here at TDLR. At Agenda Item F, you have in front of you a draft of a penalty matrix for the Midwives program. At the end of this discussion today, I'm going to DLR's. Before we do that, though, I would like to tell you a little bit about generally what the penalty matrix is used for and how it was created. The penalty matrix is used to put the industry and the public on notice of the potential penalties and license sanctions that a person is subject to if they violate your statute or your rules for this industry. So it has that public use. Inside our house, inside the Enforcement Division, the penalty matrix also serves as guidance for our prosecutors. In that process that Charlotte was describing earlier, if the prosecutor decides that we do need to charge someone formally with a violation, the penalty matrix is used to determine the amount of penalty that we will ask for that particular violation. Generally, the prosecutors are bound by the penalty ranges that are shown in the penalty matrix. The prosecutor can go outside those ranges only with specific permission from me, and I can tell you that very rarely happens. Not that I rarely grant permission, but they rarely ask for permission. A couple of things also you need to understand of what a penalty matrix is not, and I think this is actually the more important part of the discussion. The penalty matrix does not create more laws that are applicable to midwives. The penalty matrix simply lifts violations out of your statute and out of your rules and drops them into this format, and then we organize them according to classes. So there's nothing new about the law that's discussed or reflected in this document. It's simply pulled out of your statute and your rules. Another very important point, having this matrix in place does not obligate us to impose a penalty or a sanction for every violation we see. I want to say that again. Having this matrix in effect does not obligate us to impose a penalty or a sanction for every violation we see. In some of my earlier presentations with you, I've talked about this concept of prosecutorial discretion. That's a big deal here because I look at these, we as an organization look at the resources of the Enforcement Division as very scarce resources of the state. And we want to mobilize those resources and pursue violations that are important, that represent consumer harm or a threat to public safety. But not all violations are created equal. Those prosecutors have discretion, and they are expected to exercise that discretion and seek formal action only on the violations that are really worth chasing down. The matrix will only come into play for those kinds of situations, the ones where the lawyer thinks it's worth it to seek formal enforcement action. I can tell you that overall, across all of the programs that we administer, the majority of cases are resolved by informal means, by some informal resolution, so this penalty matrix doesn't even have to get looked at. We close cases. Some of the informal methods include a finding of insufficient evidence to prove a violation. That's an easy one. If we have proof of a violation, we may still close that case with a warning if it's a violation that's less serious or perhaps it's a first-time violation. We also, even in cases where sometimes the violation might be a little more serious, if the respondent, that's the person the case was filed against, if the respondent has taken action to put the consumer back in a good place, then we can still close that case as informally resolved. Because ultimately, that outcome is more desirable than getting a penalty paid to the state. If we can get the consumer put back in a good place, that's ultimately the best possible outcome that we're always looking for. So just remember that. This is not a drop-down, dropping the hammer as soon as we see a violation. There you go, it's $1,000. It's not like that at all. I can also tell you that even when we do issue a notice of alleged violation and charge someone with a violation, and we ask for a penalty that's somewhere reflected in this range, in this matrix, we can still settle the case below that. So the matrix only comes into effect for the formal actions that we're pursuing, that are contested, where we're going to a hearing. But if we're going to settle the case with a midwife, we can still settle for a violation that's even lower than the bottom of these ranges reflected here. And we often do the general expectation for the lawyer, and this is just a general kind of across-the-board policy, this is not unique to midwives, is when you issue a notice of violation, whatever amount of penalty you're going to ask for if you take the case to hearing, they are authorized by me to settle the case as low as 50% of that if the circumstances warrant. If the consumer has been made whole, et cetera, if the respondent is making steps to not commit the violation again, and so forth. So if the circumstances are right, the lawyer can drop the penalty as much as 50%. And that 50% will sometimes drop them below these dollar amounts. So, and the last thing I'll say about what a penalty matrix is not is it's not binding on our commissioners. When we have a contested case that goes to a hearing before the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and then it's presented to our commission for final approval, it is not legally binding on our commission. They're only bound by the limits of the law, which states Chapter 51 of the Occupations Code, our enabling statute, allows a penalty of up to $5,000 per violation. So that's the only thing that's binding on the commissioners. Now I can tell you in practice, the commissioners follow the penalty matrix pretty religiously because they appreciate and value the feedback that comes from the advisory boards that helps us put these penalty matrices together. So though it's not binding on them, they almost always will follow it. And I can tell you, when they don't follow it, they're usually coming on the low end and not on the high end of whatever the range is that's in the matrix. So how did we create this thing? We worked with the enforcement work group from the advisory board to create this document. The members are Brenda Buffington and Janet Dermeyer and Meredith Rentz-Cook, who is not here today. I want to take a moment and sort of echo what Ms. Dermeyer said. Thank you for your help to us because, we don't know anything about your industry. We're just starting to learn. I also want to thank Charlotte Melder, who did a lot of the heavy lifting, Chris Russey, who has also done a whole lot of heavy lifting, including scheduling, which is like the bane of my existence, and Yvonne Feinlein from the Compliance Division. She helped us with a lot of the discussions about how to rearrange the violations to put them in the proper order, and she helped me better understand the layout of your rules and how all the obligations kind of fit together. So what we did at the beginning, the staff, basically Charlotte, scours through the statutes and rules and makes a list of each provision that could be the subject of enforcement action. Everything that's in your statute or in your rules that we can enforce, we make a list of that. And then we created a first draft of this document that you have in front of you. We organized them into classes according to how serious we thought they are. We made our first stab at it, but, we don't really know. So then we started having the discussions with the work group members. And our first activity at the work group level was moving the violations around to get them in the right order according to how serious they are. So those of you who were not on the work group, if you've had an opportunity to review the document, hopefully you agree with the layout that as you move up from Class A to Class B to C and on, that the violations get more serious as you move upward through the classes, because that's the general idea. That is the place where the advice from the work group has been so very helpful to us and is always critical in development of a matrix. So after we get the order right, we decide on the penalty and the sanction amount to be applied to each class. The work group meetings were held on November 7th and December 15th, and then we had conference calls, one on January 11th with Ms. Buffington and then one on January 12th with Ms. Dermeyer to have our final discussion about the penalty amounts before we put the matrix on this agenda today. There was a lot of exchanging of emails in between there too, just to finalize the document. I want to acknowledge Ms. Dermeyer. She was actually on vacation when she had that last conference call meeting with us, but she took some time out.
She takes a lot of vacation.
Well, okay, now I wasn't going to say that part.
Hey, I'm single, you know?
But
The joys of life.
We very much appreciate it. I felt a little guilty about pulling you away from your fishing, but we very much appreciate that.
Yeah, and I was catching too.
So let me point out a few of the elements of often draw questions. If you have read the little bulleted items that describe the violation, you'll see that those are paraphrasings of the language from the statute or the rules. We have not reproduced the full language of the rule provision or the statute provision. We don't need to here. This just needs to be a short pointer to have enough of a description to let the user know what we're talking about. And then there's the reference to the statute or rule, the specific provision that's reflected if the person needs to go see the full language. Within each class, you'll see that the violations are further broken up with subject matter headings. This is something we started adding to penalty matrices a few years ago, and it's actually been very helpful, and it was very well received by the industries. It's simply a way to make it easier to find a violation within the document, because if without the subject matter headings, you have Class A and then a whole bunch of bullets, and you have to just read a whole bunch of dense information to find something. So the subject matter headings will help you get there a little more quickly. You'll notice that for each class, we have a range of penalty, and on some of the classes, there's also a range of sanction, like a probated suspension up to license revocation. That type of thing is a sanction. The dollar amounts are just administrative penalties. So with each class, you'll see that we have a single range of penalty or sanction associated with that class of violation. For example, on Class A, the range is $100 to $1,000. I want to mention this is different from the penalty matrices for TDLR's more tenured programs, some of the programs that have been with us longer. On those penalty matrices, we have three separate ranges of dollar amount for each class. We have a range for a first violation, a range for a second violation, and a range for a third violation. Chris has an example up here so you can look at. I think this comes from the air conditioning and refrigeration contractors penalty matrix. We are recommending the more simple approach with just a single range per class for midwives and all of the other health-related professions that we are receiving from DSHS for a couple of reasons. One is we don't expect very much enforcement to happen in midwives or really in any of, at least the first phase of the program's transfer from DSHS. So at least in the first couple of years, a second and third violation range would be largely academic. It wouldn't get much use anyway. But the bigger reason is we're making this recommendation based on our experience with using some of those penalty matrices in some of our older programs. Having those separate ranges for first, second, and third has become a source of a lot of confusion and a lot of debate in our contested cases. The lawyers argue about it. The judges argue about it. Even our commissioners on occasion have argued about it because people have varying opinions about when those various ranges should take effect. And then there are limitations on how far we can look back into history to consider someone's history of violations, and that further complicates the discussion. So to avoid that confusion sort of entering into our enforcement in these new programs, we would like to try just having a single range of violation, single range of penalty, and hopefully that'll be a cleaner and simpler approach. Now, a side effect of that is that it's going to require a little more of that discretion on the lawyer's part, because whether you've got someone with 0 violations or someone with 10, you have to decide upon a penalty that's somewhere in that one range, and you don't have 3 separate breakouts to help guide you. But we think that'll actually be a better system.
Is that part, Lori Fremgen, is that
Yes.
part of the purpose of that range? Because I notice each class has kind of a wide range of the number amount.
I'm sorry, is what the purpose?
Well, I was curious about the purpose, like the Class A is $100 to $1,000, that's a wide range.
Right.
So is that part of the?
Yeah, I neglected at the beginning. I'm glad you asked that question. The purpose of the penalty matrix is to establish a range of penalty or sanction that the violations are subject to. And we are actually, aside from just thinking that it's a good idea, we are actually obligated by the law. Chapter 51, the agency's enabling statute, requires us to set out penalties or sanctions that each violation is subject to. We believe the range is a better approach than simply a one-shot. If it's a Class A, it's $1,000 because of the varying levels of seriousness, even within one class. You know, we talked about this a lot at the work group meetings, that violations in this industry, in this profession, can vary widely according to the consumer harm that's presented. And so we wanted to allow enough discretion in there to take those circumstances into effect. So these ranges, if they look wide, that's one of the reasons why.
Okay.
Janet
Yes.
Dermeyer, if I can give you a little illustration. Failed to provide a disclosure of legal requirements in both English and Spanish when required. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm never going to get a client that is going to ask for Spanish because they couldn't ask me. I wouldn't know what they were asking for. I'm never going to see that violation. But if you had a midwife who never gave those ever, even in English, and it became, you know, a repetitive thing, then, you know, the first time it came out, they could give the $100 fine. But if it keeps continuing to be a problem, and they keep getting complaints because that's not coming through, then they have a sliding scale because now it's a repetitive issue, and it needs to be addressed a little more seriously. That was the kind of thinking along that line.
Right.
Because there's such a big variability even within the violation itself.
Right. Right.
Okay.
In some of the other programs that we administer, we have this concept of a binary violation, and that's a you did it or you didn't, and that's it. And there's not really much difference from one case to the next in terms of the impact of that violation upon somebody. But you have very few in your industry that I would characterize as binary. And so the broader range, I think, is a good idea to account for that. Another unique thing for the new programs, the new health-related programs, is that we've set out separate categories for the standard of care violations, and with the words standard of care in the heading of the violation. And this is a pointer for our staff when we're working the cases. Any violation that falls under the heading of standard of care is a violation that when we're investigating it, we're always going to need the advice of an expert witness. And so that's we're trying to make the process as formulaic as possible and take away a lot of the mystique of, oh, what is this enforcement, this scary thing? And so we had a lot of discussions during the work group meetings about, okay, is this a violation that we're going to need an expert to help us decipher? You know, when you investigate, the first thing you do is you just determine simply what are the facts. But if you have a standard of care situation, then you're going to have to determine whether those facts fit with some particular standard that applies to your profession. And that's where the expert's guidance comes into us. So just, one simple example. In Class D, we have the violation of failed to initiate immediate transfer of care when a condition during labor or delivery required a transfer. Okay, so failed to initiate immediate transfer of care, that's a fact that we can probably establish fairly easily just by determining what the facts are. But when a condition during labor or delivery required a transfer, that is an expert opinion waiting to happen. We are going to need an expert to say that because none of us on staff are experts, and if we took this case to a hearing, we would not be qualified to testify to that. So that's just one example. We will still sometimes need to seek the opinion of an expert witness on cases that are not identified as standard of care, but we wanted to use that heading for the ones where we're always going to need an expert, just to give us a good, basic structure to start with. And as we go along with enforcement, in a couple of years, we might revisit some of this stuff. We might think, oh, some of those that we identified as something else need to be brought under standard of care. So we needed a place to start. Another thing I'd point out about the layout and the grouping of the violations in your rules, you have several series of rules that list conditions that require a certain thing to happen. For example, a referral or a transfer. And in each one of those rules, the language says that the action be taken, either the referral or the transfer, and that the midwife document that that action was taken. So those are actually two different violations. Either making the referral or transfer, you either did that or you didn't, and then you either documented it or you didn't. And we had some discussions about that, and we decided to break those. So in the document, you'll see a set of violations that are just whether or not you took the action, the referral or the transfer, and then there are separate violations that they're citing back to the same rule, but the other part of the violation is whether you did the documentation or not. And in some instances, we categorize the documentation part as a lower violation. For example, the transfer type of violations. If you didn't do a transfer when you were supposed to, that's going to fall under Class D under the heading of standard of care transfer violations. If you didn't do the documentation for those, that's going to be under Class C under documentation.
Janet Dermeyer, and I would like to add, just for clarification, we really did have a lot of discussion about that, and we talked about when you transfer someone out of care, a lot of times it's an emergency situation. And so we don't have time to chart it, quite frankly. I mean,
Right.
especially if you're limited with your support system. You've got an assistant, but she's packing up all your stuff, getting it in the car because you don't know if you'll ever get back to their house to get it. And so, and the idea is you want to get them to the hospital as soon as possible. And so charting often gets kind of left behind. And so we were very conscientious that we didn't want to penalize a midwife for doing what she should be doing and not sit down and go, hang on just a minute because I need to chart this first because I don't want to be in violation. So after a lot of discussion, I felt reassured by your staff that that's definitely something that is taken into consideration. Mm-hmm. So they're not looking for what all can we collect in violations to really throw at this midwife. They're going to look at the circumstances, and in other words, there's a legitimate reason why it wasn't charted. And so they're not looking to penalize the midwife because she didn't do that, because there was a legitimate reason why that didn't occur. I mean, there could be a verbal report or a late entry or something down the road later, but.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
There's
Victoria
plenty of ways
Meinhardt,
to-
just a point on documentation. I mean, we don't know if we didn't document it, that it didn't, you can't prove it happened. So, I feel like with documentation, I mean, what you're describing, that scenario, a late entry is completely appropriate and should always happen, right?
Exactly.
So, and if something is going to complaint, there's been plenty of time for that midwife to do her due diligence and go back and piece together what happened. So, documentation is huge, and, you have to do it. It's not necessarily, I mean, like, if I have a situation where I'm transferring a patient, transporting a patient in an EMS situation, of course I'm not documenting as I'm going. That's impossible. Doctors don't even document as they go. That's impossible. You have to go back later and do a late entry. So, in my opinion, there's never an excuse not to document.
I am not debating that.
Okay, I'm
And
just
that is
trying to
not
make
my
clear.
point. I'm not trying to make a point that it's okay not to document.
Okay, all right,
And we're
good.
actually, the staff is going to go to attend the ATM conference in May.
Excellent.
And we're taking the matrix with us, and we're going to expound on that in a workshop. It was simply to make a point that they're going to look at the overall picture and
Mm-hmm.
see what was going on, and they're not looking to grab a money grab to see how many violations they can
Right on, okay.
accumulate in that scenario. So that was my only point that I was trying to make. I wasn't ever trying to imply that it's okay not to have charted it.
I also have one more, question about all this. So I'm on the standards of care work group, and we're discussing definitions. So I'm looking at all the definitions, like referral, transfer, transport. It's possible that, as we go through the rules, that some of these definitions of these words they're going to change. So even if, let's say we approve this document and we go forward, and then things change within the rules, then do we go back to this document and just plug in different words and make those changes later, and we can go ahead and approve this now, and then based on other changes made out of other work groups, we just make changes as they come? Is it a living document, I guess is the
Yes,
question?
absolutely, it
Okay.
is. That's pretty standard thing that we see as rule changes happen.
Okay.
A work group will meet and agree on rule changes, and then those will go to our commission for final approval, and then after they're approved by the commission and published, then there will be another meeting for changes to the penalty matrix that follow after those rule changes. Same thing with statute changes. After each legislative session, we'll need to update this document to reflect any changes.
All right.
On that discussion of the documentation and the referral transfer type violations, when I was reviewing the matrix, I discovered a place that we need to make a correction. So if at the end of this discussion you do vote to approve the document, I'd ask that you make one correction. In Class C, it would be on page 4 under the heading of documentation violations. The very first bullet, failed to document that a recommendation for transfer was made. The words "for transfer" are missing there, and this is probably because when we split the violations into 2 separate ones, we failed to add those descriptive words. I think that would be a helpful correction just to clarify that violation. One other thing I would describe about the matrix is the treatment of unlicensed activity. This is typically an important issue for the industries that we regulate. We actually have 3 different layers or levels of unlicensed activity represented in the matrix. And again, they go upward according to more and more seriousness. The lowest level of unlicensed activity is identified in Class A under the advertising violations. And these are the holding out type violations or the advertising type violations. For example, the first one there under advertising implied in any way that the licensed midwife was registered or certified when the midwife was not registered or certified. Further down, use an identification statement or advertisement that implied the midwife was certified by a governmental entity. So these are simply statements that you make about yourself or representations you make about yourself, but it's not that you've done anything active to act as a midwife. Those violations we put here in Class A. If you move up to Class C, you'll see the second level that we considered a little more serious, which is acting or offering to act as a midwife with an expired license. So here you're actually doing something with the consumer. You do have an expired license, so then when you move up to Class E, the very highest class, you'll see the true worst form of unlicensed activity is someone who's never had a license and is acting as a midwife or offering with a particular client to act as a midwife. So we separated out the expired license and put it a little bit lower because we thought someone who has had a license in the past is less likely to create harm. Even though it is a violation, they have the education and some level of experience, so they probably are less likely to truly create harm for that consumer. So that's the treatment. That's a little unique to see the unlicensed activity separated by more than one class. We usually will see it in a B, C, E, or I mean B, C, D, where the classes are right together. But based on our discussions, we separated those out even further because we wanted to put the unlicensed activity in the highest possible class, the true bad form of it. So board members, I am happy to walk through the document and talk about the violations that are in each class as much as you want. Or if you feel comfortable with the amount of review that you've already given the document, I can open the floor and just take whatever questions you have at this time. I am at your disposal to do whatever you'd like to do.
Has everybody had time to review it?
Okay.
You looked through it? Has everybody looked through it? Okay, can we just open it for
Sure.
question? Okay.
Just one comment, and this makes it very easy for us to, at least for me, to understand. I like the way that it is organized.
Thank you.
Real quickly, though, just so I make sure I understand.
Okay.
The Class E's, which are the most egregious ones that can occur, violations that can occur. If a person is charged with having a Class E activity, they are given a $5,000 fee, administrative fee, plus they can have that license revoked. If that occurs, it goes to the enforcement side of this. Is that how that works? Who makes the decision, in other words, to take a license away? That's where I am.
The relief that's listed here, $5,000 and/or revocation of the license, is simply the outcome that we would seek, that our prosecutor would seek, if we decide to charge a person with one of these violations. The revocation is not an automatic drop dead, we're yanking your license right now. It is simply another outcome that we would be seeking in an enforcement action, and there would be the full opportunity of the person to request a hearing before SOA and have a full contested case if they want to. But, and one other thing I'll say, you see the words and or,
Yes,
that means we can choose to pursue one or the other or both. If the word plus were used, then I don't think we've used plus anywhere in your matrix, but if that were used, it would mean we would be, the lawyer would be obligated to seek both a penalty and a license sanction. So for this class in particular, there will be some violations here that sort of, if the person gets away with it and they've got a license, we want to yank the license as well as penalize them. But one of the violations from here is obtaining a license by fraud or attempting. So if someone commits some kind of fraud in the application process and we catch them soon enough that we don't issue the license because we figured out what was going on, we still want to penalize them though. So that's why we have the $5,000 here as well, since there's no license to take.
Thank you.
Sure.
Lori Fremgen, I think there might be a typo on.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It's under Class E. E as in Edward, prohibited practices, and it says falsified information on an application. Do we want to make that, I'm assuming that's birth certificate application. Is that right, or is that?
Well, let's pull up that rule provision and see what it says, 115.1.13. That's out of your midwives.
It's initial application for
Rules.
licensure.
It's for your license, right?
License application.
I don't know. Well,
It's the
It's your
application.
application for
That's-
license.
licensure.
The rules section is about applying for a license to be a midwife.
Okay. Do we want to make that more specific on
Sure.
here, or is that not necessary because it directly
We can
quotes
say
the
on a
rule?
license application,
Okay.
would that
I think that'd
help?
be good.
Okay. It's interesting that you bring that up, because if you look a few bullets up on the list, the whole concept of falsifying information on a birth or death certificate is reflected here in Class E as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And that was a thing that was discussed by the
Yeah.
group, that we want that to be a very serious. So we'll change this one to falsified information on a license application.
Yeah.
And, I mean, do we want to even make it more specific? Because it's all about initial applications for licensure. It's not
Well,
even about renewal.
Remember that she said that these bullet points are not worded to be complete
Completely
references.
specific.
This is a reference tool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I just
And it
know there's
re-
differences between the initial application and then a renewal application.
But it refers to
It
the
refers to it,
rules.
okay.
the rule,
Yeah.
so that should.
I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
One is this document going to be public
Yes.
information? Okay.
Yes. After this group votes on it, if you vote to recommend that it get approved, it'll go to our commission,
Mhm.
and then hopefully the commission will approve it, and then it is published in the Texas Register and also on our website.
Okay.
This is not a rule.
Yeah.
This is simply a policy of the agency.
Right.
But it is published on the website, and it's
Okay.
available for the whole world to see.
Okay. And then another question I had was, one of the things we commonly did at the Department of Health was recommend some education or some chart review. Is that going to be separate from this matrix?
No.
Is that something that we're including in?
Christina, do you mind
Enforcement?
if I address that?
Sure.
Okay.
Janet Dermer, because it was one of the things I was going to bring up.
Okay.
We talked about this at length because one of the things that we've done in the past was the object for us, for complaint review, was not to just slam a midwife and punish her. And, the idea was we wanted to make the consumer safer, which, so in the long process of that, we wanted to make the midwife better.
Mhm.
And we were concerned about this process because we're concerned about, well, what happens to that corrective tissue, if you will. And so in discussing it, then what was explained to me, and I was very satisfied with that answer, was that we can still, when they bring in, again, we're talking about standard of care, as we bring in an expert witness, hopefully it will usually be a midwife, you know, but, you know, the applications, I don't have a clue who the applications came from, who understands our protocols and everything, they can still, that expert witness can recommend that there be a chart review. We can refer, we can make, we can require that they be shadowed by another experienced midwife. We can require that they take further educational things. All the things that we did in complaint review can still be components of this expert witness, and they can be a requirement of that violation.
Okay,
Right.
great.
Which was,
Right.
I thought, I was very satisfied with knowing that we can still work that way to still make the midwife better and to make the
Right.
consumer safer, which is all of our goals.
Yeah.
And those outcomes can be part of an agreed resolution that is represented in a formal final order. And those outcomes can also be part of an informal resolution of a case. You know, if some of those things are done by agreement, that might be enough to just close the case without even seeking a penalty or any license sanction. So, you know,
Like if we were satisfied with the midwife's response,
Right.
and we've done the review, she's continued some education, y'all might be very satisfied that the
Right.
corrective measures have been met, and so it won't even be a
Right,
violation.
right. And so if we have already issued a notice of alleged violation, we can always pull that back. We're not committed to that outcome once we've issued that document, so. And I can tell you that in the early days of enforcement with any new program, typically, that's what's more important to us, rather than popping
Us
people
too.
with a bunch of hard penalties.
Yeah.
Right, us
Because,
too.
you know, we want to see the industry learning and advancing
Right.
and getting better. And then at some point, you know, people who continue to violate, then we have to be harder on them. But, you know, we're not about just hitting people with a bunch of penalties.
Mike Nix, I have a topic for discussion I'd like to bring up, and that's one of the violations that's listed under Class C, used alcohol or drugs intemperately while engaged in the practice of midwifery. I believe that needs to be elevated to at least a Class D, and my reasoning is that this may represent an ongoing disease status of alcoholism or drug dependence, and that alcoholism or drug dependence may pose a future risk to future patients. So I think there has to be the ability to suspend or revoke a license in the identification, or that was the case. So I know this is fairly broad, because the way that this encompasses, it could be anything from intemperate use at some point of time while practicing midwifery, all the way up to acute intoxication during the management
Right.
of a patient and or management of a client. So I think that specific one needs to have the ability. There needs to be included in the possibility the suspensions or revocation of license.
Okay. So your suggestion would be to move that to a Class D?
That's correct.
Okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts
I
about
was
that?
thinking the same thing earlier when I read that.
You know what, and I don't have any objections to that. It was in the conversation, I've never seen it, so it didn't seem like something that was gonna be very
Right.
probable.
Right.
But because of that, I wouldn't have any objections to moving it.
And I don't want to downplay your concern, but I can tell you that as an evidentiary matter, proving that case would be a difficult case to prove, because you have the word intemperate that is an evidence word that would have to be proved in some way. But definitely, I have no objection with moving it to a higher class.
Intemperate that's a funny word to have in there. Was that actually in the?
Yep.
It is in your
Rules.
statute
It's in the
and your
In the
rules.
statute?
Yes.
It's in the statute.
Yeah, it's a
203,
very
404,
subjective word.
A4.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is.
It's a little dated, isn't it?
It's a dated, subjective word.
Was everybody able to find the specific violation that Dr. Nix was referencing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I had one other thing. Janet Dermeyer. I actually contacted Jackie Griggs, who actually did a research project on midwifery in the state of Texas. And she actually got back to me, and she said that midwives in Texas, on average, make an income of, I think it was, I have it, it was either 20 or 30 to $50,000 income on a year. So in our work, we started off with fees that were a lot higher than this, and we worked it down to basically about 50% of the original amounts. And I did clarify too in our meetings that I was going to object on that even further, because when we've got midwives that serve an area where there aren't even OBs. They're the only ones offering obstetrical care or midwifery care, birth assistance. And we don't want to make midwives go away. And for a lot of these midwives, especially who are in between big cities or have smaller practices, or a new midwife who hasn't built up a clientele yet, a $2,000 fine could be the difference between her giving up her practice or not. And we don't want to get rid of any midwives. And I think the fees are still too high. So bottom line, I still think the ranges are even too high for when you look at a class of people who typically do not make much money to begin with. And our work is already hard, and we work hard for our money.
But I thought the fees weren't mandatory, they were an option.
No, you're
These
right,
are-
they're not mandatory.
Right.
I still would like to see them lower. That's just my opinion. Especially when even you said in your presentation earlier that the people on the SOA judges and things tend to look at matrices and actually follow them religiously. So
Our commission.
Your
Yeah.
commission, and we've worked real hard at those things, and I've come to trust you. There's that building blocks that we've talked about, but I don't know the commissioner. And the
Yeah.
commissioner doesn't know us. And so when there's still this randomness out there when we're building this document that's going to be used religiously, I still think the fees are too high.
The document will be used religiously when a formal enforcement action is pursued. But remember, the majority of cases are resolved without even any reference to the penalty matrix, because we're not seeking formal enforcement action. And, I'll just share some of the things that I
Sure.
discussed with you in the work group. When we create a penalty matrix, what we're trying to do is slice up the authority that we have under the law to pursue a violation from anywhere from $1 up to $5,000. So what I hope to see, and I think generally what our public expects to see, and perhaps our commission expects to see, is slices taken out of that are spread across the matrix to represent the relative seriousness of the violations. As we move up through the classes, you can see that the bottom number is still fairly low until you get to Class C, and then Class D, the bottom number goes up to 1,500. And then the top number of each range gets higher as you go up through the classes. Another point that I want to make, and perhaps it goes without saying, if someone commits a violation and it's at the point that we are going to be seeking formal enforcement action against them, the penalty should be punitive. And we are talking about a bad actor, a person who has, I understand the desire to be supportive of the industry, and we definitely have a lot of that thought process going into this whole development of this document. But at some point, you have to be okay with your bad actors getting a bad penalty against them, because that's a teaching process in itself, not only for that midwife, but for everybody else in the industry. So, especially, looking at the document, especially the Class C, D, and E, I feel like those penalties need to be toward the higher end of the $1 to $5,000 because those are the more serious ones. And we did make the bottom number on the Class A and B. We made that bottom number really low.
Yeah.
You know, $100 and then $300 for Class B. And even on Class C, I think we dropped it quite a bit. So if you have specific suggestions for where you would rather see those dollar amounts, we can talk about that. And, you know, I'm not married to any of these, but I just suggest to you that
Yeah.
the bad actors need to have some penalties
Mhm.
and some license sanctions, and we just have to be comfortable with that being
I
part of
agree.
an outcome of enforcement.
I agree with what's on there, and I don't think we have very many bad actors.
Right.
I
agree
Lori
too.
Fremgen, the only kind of issue that, that I think might be taken into consideration perhaps might be, you know, we've had a lot of accusation of falsifying birth certificate information for the midwives on the border. And it's, in my opinion, it's a racist issue, because they're primarily Mexican midwives serving a Mexican population. In general, this is a really poor population. And so we saw those cases all the time and often dismiss them. And we almost always dismiss them because the information wasn't complete and
It wasn't verifiable.
and it wasn't verifiable. And so that I think is perhaps my concern when I see $5,000 on falsifying a birth certificate when you have that kind of a scenario. So,
Would you like to propose moving that to a lower class?
not necessarily moving it to a lower class, but these midwives are harassed.
Mike Nix.
Yeah.
But we just said that we almost never found them
Right.
culpable, and I believe I heard you say that it's even more difficult to actually bring these, to actually bring this to, it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like, it seems like it would be the case where it's obvious that there was an intentional, I think it's for the,
Legitimate.
for the review, for the enforcement to decide whether that was legitimate or not legitimate.
Yeah.
Because if they then decide it was legitimate, which it sounds like it's fairly difficult to find that as a
Right.
Yeah.
legitimate complaint, that then those are really cases that need to be addressed. And so
Yeah. Okay.
I understand your concern, and I agree that we had a lot of those that seemed like that.
Yeah.
But none of ours ever came to it, and it sounds like even less of, none of the previous investigations that were performed through the previous
Right.
board had came to that very
Well-
frequently, and I think it sounds like it may even be less frequent that
I can,
come through this board. So-
Okay.
we can look at the actual language of the statute or the rule, but just based on the paraphrasing that we have here, there is an evidentiary requirement here that we have to prove that somebody knew the information was false or fraudulent. There
Right.
again, sort of like the issue we discussed earlier, that again is an evidentiary question that will be very difficult to prove
Yeah.
with an investigation of events that happened in the past and when did you know what, and, you know,
Well,
so
and-
I agree, it'll probably be very seldom here as well that we're able to
Okay.
prove this violation, but if we can prove that,
Yeah.
Well, and I'm old
Yeah.
enough to remember when there was some
When it
that
was
were
actually
legitimate.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they needed them.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's legitimately happening, for sure, I think it's a very serious violation.
Right.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Victoria Meinhardt. I actually don't have a problem with the fines because I feel like that the process that I'm hearing TDLR tell us is that they're going to go through a lot of discovery and looking for evidence and trying to really suss out, you know, is this something we're really going to, you know, do something punitive for or not, and that most cases are decided through like some sort of mediation process. But if somebody does truly, you know, fail to do something that should be involve a revocation of license or a $5,000 fine, perhaps they should get that $5,000 fine. I mean, we have 16 cases coming over from DSHS. We have repeat offenders that came through numerous times. I would have loved a penalty matrix, watching from the distance, being like, yes, this person gets this. We've seen her 5 times. let's fine her, and this, I mean, I think this really gives that possibility. It also gives the possibility that you're only being fined $100 for what you did. I'm also noticing that certain things that are in Class A are also in Class B and Class C. So, how do you make the determination that, this person failed to provide a prospective client informed choice and disclosure statement? That's in, a Class B. I think it's also up in Class A or Class C. So are these just about?
You shouldn't find anything repeated.
Okay, maybe I'm just reading it wrong.
Give me an
which is
example
possible.
of what you're talking about.
I think I saw the informed choice and disclosure in a couple places, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
So let me just look at it again, and then I'll ask my question. But I don't necessarily have a problem with the fines that are being suggested. I really feel like that we have to have a way of just stopping some certain repeat offenders. This is not about your first-time violator who, we can figure out, but for certain situations, I think we have to have the power to do this.
Brenda Buffington.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to clarify, we talked about it in the work group, but if a complaint comes in and the person has violated several things in different classes, will those penalties be layered upon them?
Yes,
Will
if
just
you
go for
have
the
a,
most,
right, if you have a Class B and a Class C, for example, we would allege the two violations separately, and we would seek a penalty for each violation separately. So the one for the Class B would be somewhere within that range, and then the one for C would be somewhere within that range. And in the actual document, there will be one total amount. But during the hearing and during the presentation of the case to the commission, we have to be able to quantify that penalty and say, well, 300 of it was for the Class B and 500 of it was, for the Class C, or whatever the case was.
Janet Dermeyer, I'd like to address a little bit, counter what Vicki was saying, excuse me. We have had complaints in the past from midwives that were really good midwives. They just made a bad decision or a bad choice. And we've got some really good midwives in our state. I'm real proud of them. And sometimes they have a complaint, and it is a legitimate complaint. And again, I don't want to destroy them with a fine that is so high. Now, I've been working with this committee, and I really like them a lot, and I really trust them a lot. And I don't think that they're out to get us or out to violate it. Yeah. But I've also been working on this board for a very long time, and there's been a lot of personnel changing over, and even our board has changed a lot, and we have not always been real popular or liked. And so my concern is, again, looking in the past, because that's part of my history. I don't ever want us to get in that position where we've hung ourselves because we've made this document that wonderful Christina, who's going to move on and move up as soon as she gets a promotion and might not be representing us next time, or Charlotte, who's wonderful, and but we may have another attorney who thinks midwives should not be even practicing. We've seen it.
It's true.
We've seen it. And so I'm not trying to be a reactionary, but I also want to be very diligent and not throw my sister midwives under the bus. Well, because we have a good midwife that made a decision that was probably, maybe she hadn't slept for 3 days. I mean, we've been there. How many of us on this board today have not had to sleep for 3 days? I mean, it happens. So, I mean, and it sounds really good to say they have discretionary, they can be very discretionary about these, and I do believe that they would be. And again, when they have a complaint, what if the expert witness that they call is Dr. Nix? Now, Dr. Nix is he's always been very supportive of us. But what if he's not on the board anymore? Mm-hmm. And what if we have another doctor on the board who really doesn't think we should be practicing at home? And he gets called as an expert witness. And I realize nobody wants that right now. Nobody's planning that right now. It's no one's intention to do that right now. But I've seen it. And so I don't want to open that can of worms and have that on the table, So that's my concern, is that those things do change, because we don't know, we can't predict the future.
So what's your alternative proposal? I mean, the only one that I'm seeing that seems to be like, really there's no argument is Class E $5,000 or a relocation. I mean, all the other ones seem to have a range. You know, you can do like a Class C, 750 to 3,500. There's a range of monies that could be charged to you. But Class E is the only one that really is like pretty financially punitive as far as like.
I don't have a problem with E. It's
I don't either.
C and D is the
C
ones
and
that
D
I
are your
think
problems.
should be
Okay,
lower.
so what do you see as reasonable?
Well, again, here's the thing. If we had, let's take Class C. You've got 750 to 3,500, okay? If we have this board right here and this program directors that we have right now, and we have a complaint come in, I believe it would be handled very fairly. I do. But let's now jump forward 10 years, and now we have a hostile board, advisory committee. We have a program director that doesn't know who we are and thinks, I don't even want to deal with it. And they're probably going to do the 3,500. We don't know that, but I think 3,500 it can be, for certain circumstances, too much. I'd like to see it lower than that. I'd like to see 500 to 2,000. Again, midwives who are making $30,000 to $50,000 a year, and we're stacking those. So if they've got one complaint in C, they might have another one in D. You could run up a $10,000 fine, and they're just going to go take my license. I'm out of here. Now you've got a whole district of the state that might not even have any birth support at all.
Christina,
Because the midwife just.
if I could jump in.
Mhm.
Ms. Dermeyer, I appreciate your concerns. They are very passionate and real concerns. And I can't speak to what happened to you before, but I can speak to that's not how this works. Even though, because I've worked for Christina, and I've worked as a prosecutor, and I've had prosecutorial discretion. But this lady doesn't play. It's not how this works. At TDLR, we have a process. We do have discretion, which is a parameter. We can't just close a case because we feel like it. It's not that personal of a situation.
Exactly.
We really are, we follow the law. If the legislature blesses us with a program, we respect every program that they bless us with, and we act accordingly. Whatever a personal, that just doesn't come into this. It's what is my job as a prosecutor or whatever my position is at TDLR. That's why we put these things in place. Christina, how many attorneys do you have now working under you?
16.
Out of those 16 attorneys, there are parameters for our reviews, for our being hired, for our being fired, for all of that. And we know as professionals how to operate within those parameters. But how do we set the parameters? By having safeguards such as this. Now, you're the board, and that's why we're in front of you, because this is the process. We're looking for your wisdom here. But please don't feel, even if Christina left tomorrow, and we hope not, I don't think so.
No, you can't leave. I'm sorry.
But we're setting the parameters. I'm glad you liked her. I love her to death. But whether I liked her or didn't like her, these are the parameters that are set in enforcement. And if she leaves tomorrow, they're not going to change because she left. It's still going to be enforcement. These are still going to be there. It's not going to be, oh, I don't like midwives, so I'm just going to charge them. It just doesn't work that way.
That's so refreshing.
We
And
did,
I
we did
can-
look at those, we did look at those things, and we did take all that into consideration. And we wanted it to be a little broad in there, for discretion.
Are we getting back into the trust issue?
Maybe,
Okay. Okay.
maybe so.
Can-
And I don't want to build, I'm going to always defend my sister midwives, because
Yes.
there's really not very many of us in the state. I do want to protect them, and that's not y'all's job to protect the midwife.
Well,
But
but
it's
it's
kinda
our
mine,
job to be
you know.
fair and not to be punitive. And no one wants us to be punitive. That's not our job. So it's our job to set these parameters according to the statute, to build our rules according to the statute, even when they say things like, what was the thing for alcohol?
Intemperate.
Intemperate. I haven't heard that since a very old movie. But we work with what the law is, and we work within those parameters. I mean, I'm so sorry for, what has occurred. But it's even though we're a big old happy family and it's very personal here, That's between comrades, you know? We operate within the parameters of the law. I wouldn't know who used a midwife, who didn't use a who got a dog from a licensed breeder. That just doesn't come into it. You know what I mean? Who fixed your air conditioner? Because we deal with all those. Do you have a well? Did you get I don't know. But I do know water well law. So it's just, please don't think punitive here. It's not how we do things.
So, okay, thanks, Mary. I'm wondering,
Is it within our rules to even, as she said, to even advise that we change that? Or do we have any say-so in the range?
That is, the range is,
no.
I'm handing
Just
back
the
over.
range.
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, if anybody has any other comments about the amounts or the ranges, or
Brenda
anything in addition to
Buffington?
what
I
Janet
do,
has said.
yeah.
Okay.
How does this compare to other industries that you,
Good question.
Well,
deal with?
we can show you some of the others if you would like to look at them. Which one do you have up there?
ACR Class C.
Okay, so here's an air conditioning contractor, Class C, and do they have five classes, Chris? Okay, so you'll see that the top, the Class D was the same, $5,000 in revocation. Here's a Class C, which would be the equivalent of your Class D. For a first violation, $1,000 to $5,000 plus 1 year probated suspension up to revocation for a first violation. So, their range goes even higher, and it calls for a sanction on even the first violation of that class. So that's a little higher. If you want to see some of the others.
Our Class D is 1,500 to 45.
Right.
Starts at 15.
what other
Well-
industry can you think of that might be anywhere comparable?
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
air
and that's
conditioning.
the
Lives at
thing.
stake.
It's dangerous to go down that road because,
Yeah.
And I
I
don't
don't-
care what the other programs
I'm
have.
just-
And
I
they've
don't
been
see-
incredibly
Wondering
gracious.
what's
They,
normal.
working on this, they actually did lower that bottom figure almost in half
Yeah.
because we were negotiating it.
Yeah.
Then I just wanted it to be a little further.
I can tell you that on the dollar amounts, on the ranges, something that you need to bear in mind is that top dollar amount, it has to be high enough to penalize the repeat offender.
yeah.
More harshly, and not that we think we're going to see that person very often. I don't think we are. I don't think we'll utilize these top numbers for years. But when it's time to have that one really bad actor who has a long history, we have to have the authority to hit them high enough to make a difference and to send that ripple effect among the industry as well that, oh, yeah, she did some bad stuff. She really does need to have that high
Yeah,
penalty.
those real bad ones and the ones that have been repeat, that we've dealt with them, are gonna have multiple violations.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. I mean,
Yeah. And to the point that you made earlier about racking up the $10,000 in penalties, I would ask you to consider maybe that person deserves $10,000 in penalties if they have so many different violations stacked up, and especially if they have a history. At some point, the protection of the industry includes, in my opinion, kicking out some of the bad actors. That's another way to elevate your industry. And I think that if you're too protective of everybody, including the bad actors, that's not helping. That doesn't help your reputation. So, that's my perspective as an enforcement person.
I think initially when I looked at these amounts, I thought they were high as well, but as we've gone on in this conversation, I feel satisfied about just the process and the mediation and the amounts, so.
For the midwives who do not practice, say, in a birthing center, but do home deliveries, and they are responsible for maintaining the medical records, mothers and babies for 18 years, is that correct?
yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Mother for 5 years and
Baby
babies
for
until age of
18.
majority.
So we were just talking about things happen to these records, and, a flood in Houston just destroyed houses where they
Right.
did keep records. There were lawyers, and a lot of things happened on the first level in the offices.
Right.
So when things like that happen, they're not necessarily responsible for that automatic Class D,
Right.
right?
Right, those would be circumstances that would be developed in the evidence as we investigate the case, and
Okay.
we can
Those may
certainly.
not even be prosecuted.
I seriously doubt something like that would even be prosecuted.
But there's some teeth in it, so when we have a midwife who's had 3 fires and her grandma died 3 times, and we've had those.
We
sorry,
have had
but
that, that's true.
Nobody, it didn't seem like anybody had
really?
investigated to even verify that that happened, which I'm feeling very confident that because we've got the investigating team and the enforcement team and the lawyers that
Yeah.
that'll be verified much more thoroughly.
So do we have any more discussion on this penalty matrix? And do we need to take a vote? We have to vote on this? Is that
Well, I
correct?
think
You
excuse
had-
me, that there was a couple of changes that whoever makes the recommendation to pass it, and I only brought up is for a public statement, so whatever.
Okay.
But we need to, the correction on page 4, which was that documentation, Class C.
To
the
add-
documentation violation, move to D.
Um,
Those all s-
Actu-
right?
No, on page 4, under documentation violations, under in the first bullet, we need to add the words "for transfer," so
For
that it reads,
transfer.
"failed to document that a recommendation for transfer
Right.
was made," et cetera. And then Dr. Nix's suggestion on page 5, we're still in Class C here, under prohibited practices. The third bullet down, used alcohol or drugs intemperately. His suggestion was to move that to Class D. So I don't know if you want to vote on that as a group or just include that in your, or vote on that separately or include that in your motion at the end
Okay.
and have it all the changes in there together in one motion.
I think that
You can do it
yeah,
either
I think
way.
the motion should be collective. Wasn't there a typo too on page
Yes.
E? On
Class E, the very last page,
Just adding the
the
word.
4th bullet from the bottom, adding the words "on a license application."
Okay. Okay, so is there any more discussion on this matrix? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion?
I will actually make a motion. I move that we actually accept the matrix with the corrections that were discussed in this meeting, that there were three corrections. Page 4, Class C, documentation violation to input for transfer in that wordage. The typo in Class E, add on a license application, that correction, and move the the alcohol issue to move it to Class D.
Okay.
And I move that we accept the matrix with those corrections.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys for all your hard work. Charlotte,
Thank you.
wow.
Yeah.
You guys, thanks.
Christina, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris.
Madam Chair, just for the record, who seconded the motion?
Helen did.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Our soft-spoken midwife.
Yeah, right.
I had to make the motion to redeem myself. I didn't want to demonize the whole thing. I wouldn't.
All righty, let's see here. It looks like we are at, on the agenda item G, update from work groups and possible recommendations. We can start with the enforcement work group. You're back. Great.
So with the completion of the criminal conviction guidelines and the penalty matrix, that is the 2 biggest things that we had to get done with the enforcement work group. The next thing that I want to do is get with the work group and just review our enforcement procedure in a little more detail beyond just what we've been able to discuss at these meetings. And what I'm actually contemplating doing is having the enforcement work group members from all of the health-related programs come together with us and have one meeting to have one discussion about that. And the idea there is, enforcement is a machine, and we need to have an identifiable process that is repeatable and recognizable for our staff. And so I would like to have that conversation once with all of the work group members from the assorted health-related programs so that we can sort of get to a place where we have one process that satisfies the various concerns of the different groups. But at the end of the day, there's one process that our folks can follow.
Great.
So that's the next big thing. I would like to get the bulk of the penalty matrix work for the first 7 health-related programs finished. So that combined work group meeting, I'm looking at probably a couple of months from now doing that.
Mhm. Okay. Great, thank you. Licensing work group?
Okay, it appears from the back table that we don't have anything from the
Nothing.
licensing work group yet.
Do y'all have anything scheduled yet?
Okay, we have,
I do know that the standard of care work group is gonna be referring some things to you guys, so.
okay. Somebody please go to the microphone.
We can't just keep yelling.
It's what we
No
do
better,
best.
Leonard.
You speak into the microphone.
Janet will do the yelling.
All
Is
right.
that what you're saying, Dr.
Yes.
Nix?
Leonard Rivas with the licensing division. I don't have anything at this moment, but you said we,
I know that the standard of care work group is
Okay.
gonna be referring some rule changes or
Okay.
possible rewriting rules to the licensing. And then
On
I.
Pine Live with compliance, and
Oh,
I
wait.
sent an email to Dee Dee, who's his director,
Uh-huh.
for licensing with those recommendations.
Okay.
So I sent it to education and enforcement and licensing.
Okay.
So all 3, E&E, licensing, enforcement, the directors received the recommendations of the work group today.
Okay, so
And
that's
so
all happening.
they will have to schedule their
Yeah,
work
we'll have to
groups
schedule
at
that.
their discretion.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
all happening in the
Yes,
background?
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
wonderful.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank
I
you.
have a question.
oh,
Have you got any news on the jurisprudence exam, when that's going to be updated?
Is that a Ray? That's a Ray
That's
thing?
education
Oh,
and
okay.
examination.
Okay, let's do education next.
Good afternoon, Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. Could you please repeat your question?
Yes, the last meeting we had, somebody mentioned that there was going to be a revision of the jurisprudence exam, and,
Well, let's not call it a revision.
okay.
It's updated.
Update.
I don't want everybody to think that we changed something, because it wasn't changed. What happened was when the programs moved over to TDLR, we need to make sure the right wording were in the right places. So the references, if it was DSHS, it needs to say TDLR, those kinds of things. We are going to vet a lot of the questions on the jurisprudence exam, and the work group can work with us on that to see if we need to change the way it's being administered. We want to look at the whole process. Do we want to make it, because right now, as you all know, I just can click on anything and everything, and I don't have to read anything, and I just could pass it. And I think the idea here is we want people to come away with something, right? Agreed? So we need to come up with some sort of, would it still be a no-fail exam? For lack of a better term, I don't want to call it an exam, but it's a no-fail process. Maybe so, but we need to have something that would, so that the reader and the user or the licensee would be more engaged and be able to actually read and learn what they're reading and not just go through the exercise of clicking through the screens. So that's some of the things we need to discuss. We haven't changed any of that, so we just simply picked it up, looked at the items, changed what needs to be changed, and it's being administered the way it has been administered in the past.
I was on the Victoria Meinhardt, I was on the initial kind of work group that looked at the jurisprudence exam. We went through and just did simple things like
Correct.
changing the numbers on the rules because the rules numbers have changed. It was just like nuts and bolts kind of stuff.
Right.
But no other changes were made as far as like,
Correct.
you know, how it's being done. Or
But I agree, we need to look at that, and that's something we could, down the road. And this is true for all of the different programs that have a jurisprudence.
Okay. Do y'all have meetings scheduled and?
I haven't
No.
heard a thing.
No.
No.
I haven't heard
Okay.
anything. When are we going to be scheduling those meetings?
We will reach out to you when
Okay.
we're, I think we're putting the brakes on that a little bit because we don't really want to change yours. We're trying to have this done kind of feel each one out and let we're still getting, as Mary mentioned earlier, and George, we're getting all these other programs in. We don't really want to start making drastic changes to anything until we fully understand how things are ticking. So we don't want to, hit the beehive with a bat yet.
All right.
Okay.
Is it appropriate for me to make a request as far as scheduling meetings goes?
Absolutely. Keep in mind, we don't want to meet. If there's nothing to meet about, there's
no, I don't want that
it's not
either.
necessary. But
I just want to be able to show up, and that
Sure.
so I'm just requesting that, like, when we're looking at meeting dates, can we go 2 to 3 months out? Like,
Absolutely.
give me some warning.
Yes.
I can absolutely be there, but if we're scheduling things 6 weeks out, I'm discovering that
Okay.
it's impossible.
Duly noted. Yeah,
The
yeah.
more lead time, I can absolutely be there. It's
Okay.
just I have to have good lead time, so that's
Great.
just a request from
No, absolutely.
from
No.
your education committee person.
Well, we want you to be there, so we don't want, if it's not going to work for you guys, then we're going to have to push it out. But yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else? Did you have anything else too? No? Okay.
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Nothing pressing.
Okay. All righty.
Right.
And then we can.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, George Ferry again.
Yep.
And those meetings can take place by telephone too, so.
Yeah.
That's something.
I did that actually the other day, and it was okay, but there were several times that the conference call itself would cut out, so I'd miss a word, or I'd miss 2 words, or
Okay.
and it just wasn't as effective as being in person. I have a strong feeling about that if I can be somewhere in person, I'm going to get more done than being on a conference call. And the conference call it was okay, but it just did not meet that need to just really get in there and get hard work done.
And you're certainly welcome to attend in person. I mean, yeah.
I wanted to. Scheduling.
Yeah, the phone calls are for y'all's convenience. And you're right. I mean, it's better to be in the room, obviously, but we don't want y'all to, since you're paid, so highly paid in this position, we're trying to help you out a little bit.
Yeah, that was the problem. My paid job got in the way
Yeah,
of me
right.
being able to actually, be there in person.
Okay, the standard of care work group. Yvonne, do you want to come up and I can work through some of it and you can work through some of it? Okay. So, shall I start and then you can support me?
If you need any kind of support, yeah.
Thank you.
You've got
Can you
it.
midwife me through this? Thank you, Yvonne. So, the standard of care work group met on Monday. That was our first meeting. And basically what we did was kind of look at our list of things to do and kind of prioritize them. So we're looking at the comments to some of the rules changes that we made. We're looking at some of the guidelines that we created at the Department of Health. Sorry, I still have to call it that. It's still that in my heart. I guess there's some question about whether or not we can use guidelines and how enforcement can enforce the guidelines. I don't know if there's any further discussion from Monday.
Yvonne, Fine Lab Compliance. I
Mhm.
think we're going to table those until there's more internal discussion.
Okay.
So we have an outline for our meetings that includes those as tabled items so they don't get forgotten.
Mhm.
And we can work on the other assigned tasks, which the group prioritized in the order they wanted to work on them, so that they can continue to get work done. Our next meeting, you have the date for the next meeting and everything.
Yeah, okay. I think we worked really hard on these guidelines, and I think the board feels really proud of these guidelines, and they're well-written, and so we don't want to see them go to waste. So one of the things we're talking about is perhaps taking some of the enforceable issues from those guidelines and moving them into the rules. And we're also talking about maybe having ATM, our professional organization, be the one who distributes these guidelines. So.
Madam
there's a-
Chair, I just want to let you know that's not off the table. We're certainly open to look at the possibility of publishing those. So,
Okay.
But so
Okay.
the jury's out, let's say.
Okay,
We're still
yeah.
discussing it in-house, so.
Okay.
The best way to
And
go about that.
one thing I'd like to add to y'all's conversation is that part of our intention for creating these guidelines was to help you guys understand the practice of midwifery and some of these kind of maybe more specific issues. So that was part of the intention behind it.
Like I said, we're still discussing, and
Okay.
we understand the value of these documents too,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. We also talked about, one of the things I got very excited about was y'all's plain talk. And I find this so exciting because that means we can actually understand our rules for the first time maybe ever. So we looked at the informed choice agreement that is required of all midwives by our statute to give to all our clients. And the way it's worded is ridiculous. So we're going to take a look at that and try and simplify it, and maybe one day in a legislative session we'll actually get rid of it. We also we're gonna update rules on oxygen, and Yvonne, because my brain is tired, the negligent practice, you have to say that one again for me.
We talked a little bit about the idea that sometimes there are things that are so much a given that you don't have to spell them out in rule, but there should still be a rule that enables the midwifery practice that's completely out of the norm to be covered by some broad kind of negligent practice, community standards. Something that we talked about was, nobody has a rule that says don't go into the room and hit your client with a stick. But if you start doing something that's completely dangerous and not normal and wrong, you shouldn't have to spell out every single detail of what normal midwifery looks like to say, that's not acceptable, that's not safe, that's not the normal practice of midwifery. And so we talked about some kind of wording that would umbrella that concept, because the board at DSH has had a lot of flexibility to say, we're all midwives here, let's talk. This is not how it should be, right? And everybody in the audience is going, oh, that's not how it should be. And there was this real kind of consensus going on in the room, and it's different here. And so we do want to make sure that that is captured in a way that's appropriate and enforceable, but not too broad. And so that wording, negligent practice, might not be the right wording, but that's how we captured it as a concept for further discussion.
How is that, Next, how is that captured with other words underneath the licensure? Because I see that, I don't think that's unique necessarily to, I don't want to draw too loosely of but I don't think hitting somebody over the head is necessarily a part of air conditioner. So in other words, is that addressed in some way, or?
Well,
I'm trying
perhaps.
to draw parallels to what may already exist.
Right.
George Ferry again. We do have standards of practice and ethics requirements in many of our statutes. They usually address how you do business, or how you treat clients, that sort of thing. So, yes.
Maybe Lynn or Charlotte can bring that to our next work group meeting, some wording for that.
Lynn Latone, we'll be happy to provide that research,
Okay.
and that would be the appropriate place to delve into that, to
Okay.
look for possible language and possible dealings with that kind of overarching prosecutorial standard. So we'll be happy to bring those.
Okay. Okay. And then the final thing that we were discussing is the definitions that are written in our rules, and specifically the definitions of collaboration, referral, Dr. Nix, consultation,
Collaboration, referral, transfer.
and transfer. And what we found in a very interesting conversation is that we're talking two different languages here. And so Dr. Nix is going to come up with some definitions for us so that the midwives can adjust to the medical definitions, the medical model definitions, and instead of creating confusion and chaos. So that's kind of exciting. That's going to affect almost every rule.
Because that language
And
is
the-
used throughout.
Yeah, and it's also going to affect the penalty matrix too, so. Okay, anything else?
And we're looking at everywhere that those words are used to
Yeah.
make sure that if we propose any changes, we understand the implications everywhere else that word is used, so that we don't create any kind of problems for the
Mhm.
way people practice by
Mhm.
making those changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. This has been a long-standing issue between the Texas Medical Association and the midwives. A lot of miscommunications happens over these words, and so to clear up communication is going to be great.
And the
Okay.
next meeting?
And our next meeting is April 3rd. Okay. All righty. So.
And Madam Chair, just to
Yes.
clarify, I wanted to mention, so for example, in our electricians programs, we have a section on standards of conduct for engaging in electrical work. So, yeah, we do have some things that are about how you do business and how you deal with clients.
So it's a standards of conduct.
Conduct, yeah. Now, they're called, and it can be called different things, but those are sometimes those are actually mandated in statute that we have to develop standards of conduct, but doesn't mean we can't if it's not specifically mentioned, so.
Okay, great. All righty. Any recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting?
Madam Chair, before we move to that.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to E1 on the agenda, just to make a couple of updates on the executive office report. Number one, you heard me talking about our new deputy director, Carla James, and Carla's here now. So I thought I'd let her say a
Welcome.
few words, introduce herself.
Good afternoon, Carla James, TDLR. Just excited to be here. This board's a little special for me because I'm a doula.
Oh.
Or I haven't been able to practice in a number of years, but yeah, I have a special interest in this board.
Once a doula, always a doula.
Pretty much, yeah. So you may see me here and there because I'll have a special interest in this. But glad to be joining this outstanding agency, and I hope that y'all are as excited as I am. Great to be here. I think that you will find a very easy life with us.
Great, thank you.
Make it easy for me somewhere, please.
How do we
I'm
spell
sorry?
that?
I just said, make it easy for me somewhere. That's
Well, I
great.
can't do anything about your paid job, but we can certainly try to make this as smooth as possible. So glad to have y'all on board.
Okay. I think before or did you have anything else, George?
Well, I
I'm
was just
sorry.
saying one other thing that you and I talked about briefly during
Yeah.
the break, and that is about terms expiring. I think there's like at least 3 listed on the website right now that it says your term expires the end of this month. You're not getting off the hook that easy. Basically, you continue to serve until you're either replaced or you choose not to. The general practice is when someone's term is, if we get to it in time, coming due, then we contact them. Same thing if it's already passed. We will contact them, ask them, would you like to continue to serve on the board? And then we will very possibly post it out there for others to apply. But don't, fear not, you continue to be a member of the board. We want to continue to have you. So I just wanted to clear that item up because I think, like I said, there are 3 people right now that show their term expiring at the end of this month. So, and that, I promise, is it.
Okay, great, thank you. Before we go to agenda item H, I wanted to check and see if there was any public comment. No? Okay. So any recommendations for agenda items for our next board meeting?
Well, Janet Dermeyer, I have 2 things, but I'm not really sure if we can put them on the agenda. I wanted to bring up NRP.
Mhm.
Is that something that has to be done through standard of care committee? Because we've got midwives who are getting ready to renew their licenses and such, and the criteria, national criteria from the NNR people have changed so drastically that we had talked a number of times about adding some other avenues to meet the
Right,
criteria.
so that was part of the standard of care group looked at, that because that was part of the comments from the proposed rules, and we decided to send it to education.
And we have not met yet.
And licensure, so it's gonna go to the two.
Yeah, Victoria Meinhardt, education has not met yet. So until then, I think midwives are going to be in that position where they have to take the 2017 NRP edition, and they're just going to have to do it. I mean, there's nothing that we can do until we meet and discuss and look at those NRP guidelines. I mean, we can't
So
right
there's
now.
no way to extrapolate that one issue
No.
and deal with it?
We tried to discuss
On
it
the
at
next
the
agenda?
standard of care work group. It's too complex.
Yeah, right now, as it stands, we have to have take NRP from a course that is approved by American Academy of
Actually,
Pediatrics, right?
Can we not go into
that's what
that
it
right
is.
now, because
Yeah, but that's just what
we
it
can
is.
just
So
save
Janet,
that
that's the answer
for-
to your question. Like, that's just what
Yeah.
it is right now. We can't really change that yet.
Well, that was my question, whether we
Yeah.
could put that as an agenda item, address that one thing, and apparently the answer is no.
Well, is that something that the full board wants to break down and dig into, or is that a work group?
I'm sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
I was trying to get a cough drop. But has this been, I see we talked to a couple of committees and
Yeah.
has it been to work group at all?
Mhm.
Okay, back to the microphone.
I can answer it.
Okay.
It went, it went to the standard of care work group, and we discussed it on Monday, and decided to send it to licensure and education. It's an issue for both
Okay.
work groups.
Let's let them meet,
Okay.
since it just got sent.
Mhm.
And then, but your next meeting is in April?
Yeah.
And we can, it would then be covered under these work group reports if we have anything to
Mhm.
report from them. But let's let them take a shot at it.
Okay, perhaps we can tell the
Education and-
education work group that it's a priority.
That would be wonderful. Who do we have?
Education and licensing, do they have?
Education.
Have meetings scheduled?
Well, I don't think they have anything currently because you just sent them the email, right?
Yeah, that was on
So-
Monday.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
Monday. So we can get that
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, that'd be
But,
wonderful.
what is this, Wednesday? Yes. So no, not yet, but we
Okay.
have to contact everyone in those work groups, the couple of you, so as we don't have a quorum, and we can get that moving.
That'd be
But
great.
it just got sent over.
Yeah.
So if they, I just so I've got it clear in my head,
Mm-hmm.
can they take that one item, and once they've settled on that item, can that be sent on to the board for approval, or do we have to wait till that whole committee finishes all their work as a whole?
No, Janet, if that's an issue that has been worked through with the work group, and if it's ready for the
Okay.
board to listen to it, then we can proceed with that issue.
Okay.
Great.
Yvonne Fine Lab Compliance, it's going to take a rule change. We're probably not going to have a rule packet before late summer, early fall, because we'd want to roll in anything the legislature gives us if they give us anything as a change.
Okay.
We can't change it by policy, so the work group
Yeah.
could report to you, but for you to have an agenda item to recommend a rule change, probably going to be a little bit later than that, if that makes sense.
Yes, and since you brought up rule change, is the structure of this committee a rule change? So, in other words, we've got two consumer seats. One hasn't missed 2 meetings,
It's,
right? And,
Janet, that's statutory.
Yeah.
okay,
So
Yeah.
That's my question.
That is statutory.
Yeah.
The makeup of the board is
Yeah.
statutory.
I would like to, Brenda Buffington, I would like to suggest an item for the next agenda. Is maybe this is the place for it or not, but when you decide on a retired midwife, I'd like to see some changes in that. That maybe the retired midwives could be allowed to do 10 births a year and fewer CEUs, and maybe
So
look
I
at
think,
that.
I
Maybe
think
look at that.
that's an issue that's going to the licensure work group.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a
and
great-
so that, that group has not yet met. But,
But by April, maybe?
I don't know. Can we, Run.
A long
Leonard Rivas Licensing Division. What was your question again? I'm sorry.
I would like to look at the licensing requirements for retired midwives.
So can we add that to the work group
Yes.
agenda?
Mhm.
Okay. Which I think it will already be on there.
Some of us are catching up with Helen.
But I
Okay.
don't do births anymore.
Well, I would still like to do at least 10 births a year. But anyway, that's something for the work group to
Yeah.
recommend for us.
Okay, we'll
Okay,
put that
thank
on
you.
there.
Okay, thank
Anything
you.
else? No? Okay.
We're gonna wait till you get all the way back.
Okay.
to see.
Brenda, it does say if you're retired, you can't accept pay.
Say what?
It does say if you're a retired midwife, you cannot accept pay.
We need to change that too.
Yeah.
No, either you're a working midwife or you're a retired midwife.
Okay, so any agenda items that we might want to add, we can email Tamala or
Absolutely, yes.
Delia, right?
To an advisory board email, right?
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's move on, scheduling our next board meeting.
So, I have these dates to offer the committee.
Wonderful.
We were looking at, so Wednesday works well for you? Is that a good day of the week?
Sure.
So June 14th, 21st, or 28th?
That's a Wednesday. 21st, 28th, or 14th.
I'd rather not do the 21st.
How about the 14th? Is the 14th okay?
It's Flag Day. Is that a, is
Or
that a
the
holiday?
23rd? Oh, so wait a minute.
Did y'all
what-
get the,
Not that
did y'all
I'm
get
aware
Flag
of,
Day?
no.
It's
I
not
hope I
a
don't show up for work that day, and it is.
Hey, really? Well, it is
Any-
Flag Day.
Any one of those days work for me.
Earlier dates will be better for me.
14th?
14th is better than 21st is better.
Okay.
I agree with the 14th.
I'll explain why.
That's your matrix?
You'll understand why.
That's.
Going on a trip.
Oh, I know why.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good reason. Okay.
What's his reason?
We have a due, we have a pregnancy with a due date, we're pregnant
He's
with a due
gonna
date
be a
of July
papa.
3rd. And so
Oh.
the closer we get to July 3rd, the more likely I won't be there.
Congratulations.
Yes, yay.
I will be there, I will not be here.
That's right, you will be there.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, let's go with the 14th. I'm
All right.
going-
Have you hired a midwife yet, Dr. Nix? I'm available.
I'm semi-retired, I'm very available.
All
right.
right, no free advertising.
Yeah, I know. I guess
So,
the 14th then, huh?
14th, and same time, 1 o'clock in the
Sure.
afternoon?
Great.
Okay.
All right, so we have June 14th, 2017 at 1 PM at this location.
You don't?
George, can I also ask, when you send out those notices to us, would you include the address each time?
Sure.
So we don't have to go back into old emails to dig up the address
Think of
again?
the address, okay, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Pamela says yes.
Yeah. Okay, is that the only meeting we have to schedule? Okay. I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.